Dear ladies, thank you for this opportunity of participating from Europe on this wonderful program, Empower Her. I want to talk about my lovely topic, perforating veins, which is really one of my heartiest items. I have no conflict of interest to this topic. Just to remember, the perforating veins were renamed, and these are the perforating veins of the upper thigh and of the medial thigh, and the old names were Dodd and Hunter and Boyd, and I love them because they are very short. But just to know, these ones are the most important ones on the saphenous veins, and those are the most important draining the saphenous vein, the great saphenous vein, and we have those on the posterior part of the calf, which is the MI, which is the gastrocnemius point, the most important one, draining or feeding the small saphenous vein. So when we study the perforating veins in the leg, we do not have to find each perforating vein just because we know it is there. Also in phlebography, if we have a look at this image, this is the deep vein, the femoral vein, and this is the great saphenous vein with a reflux until this point, escaping here to the tributary. And this is the tiny, healthy distal saphenous vein. And we know here are at least 3 perforating veins, but they are not part of the recirculation. Blood with the contrast medium fills the recirculation, and these perforating veins are not escape points and are not re-entry points. They are not contrasted, so they are irrelevant to the phlebologic investigation. So we have only to investigate those with a large visible diameter. How do we investigate? We investigate in standing position, where we will find little or no floor in the superficial veins, and we have to provoke it. This can be done with this manual compression of the calf or with the muscular contraction, for example, with the toe elevation. And this is called muscle systole. And then we wait what happens when we release the calf or we put down the toe again. And then we see what happens in the muscular diastole after the relaxation. This is the most important phase of the flow. And we investigate the fate of the flow after it has been propulsed upstairs. If we have competent valves, the backflow will be less than 0.5 or 1 second, depending on the school. My school is 1 second. And if the valves do not close, the blood will flow a long time backwards. And this will mean it will flow footwards through the saphenous vein and then will re-entry somewhere into the deep vein. And sometimes it will be the escape point. It will come out of a perforating vein and fill the vein. But not every dilated vein is a guilty vein filling the recirculation. To have a little remember of physiology, this is a deep vein at rest. In systole, we push up the blood. In diastole, when the valve is closed, there is no reflux. And this, we will represent it like this: systole, diastole, no reflux. If we have a combination of the deep vein and the superficial vein, this is the deep vein, this is the superficial vein, at rest, at compression, and then at rest, in diastole, we see there is no retrograde flow, neither in the deep vein nor in the superficial one. And in the diastole, there is a short drainage from the superficial to the deep. It is different when we have a recirculation due to a incompetent proximal valve. This is the case of the great saphenous vein with the terminal insufficient axial reflux and a re-entry through a distal perforating vein. So in systole, we push up in both the blood to the heart, and in the diastole, in the deep vein, there is no reflux, but through the terminal valve into the great saphenous vein, and it reflows until the distal re-entry vein where the blood goes in. And then in the diastole, in this rest phase, we will see a long-lasting inwards flow. This is like this image. You have a systole when you measure here, and you have a long-lasting reflux in diastole. This is the reflux. And if you look at the same recirculation thing at the re-entry perforating vein, you will have in systole and diastole an inwards flow. draining, even though the perforating vein is really wide. It's opened. So if you find a flow towards the deep vein, especially in diastole, you can be sure that this vein is only draining. It is not guilty for the recirculation. Different is it when we have the perforating vein as an escape point. This is the case. You have a small saphenous vein here, a large one here, and here you see the perforating vein. And schematically, you see from the deep vein outflow and into the great saphenous vein at this part. If you see the thing in color-coded duplex, you see in the diastole that there is an outflow through the perforating vein. And this is also shown in an image here in PV mode. You have a systole inwards flow and in the diastole an outwards flow returning from the deep vein to the superficial vein. This perforating vein is guilty. This is feeding the superficial venous reflux. Then we have here a little movie showing perforating vein in the fossa popltea. And the question is this a reflux in diastole and systole? And you have all already seen this is systole and diastole, and you have a long-lasting red reflux towards the superficial venous system in diastole. Last show, again, systole, everything is blue, diastole, reflux from the deep vein through the perforating vein to the superficial venous system. So again, this image, you know it already. We have a reflux, a recirculation, we have a re-entry here, and we have a wide and open vein, but we have only a drainage flow in diastole. This one is also a paratibial vein, typical one, distal in the calf, and with a re-entry in diastole. And this vein is not pathological. We remember this image. This was the proximal reflux point, but not all the refluxing perforating veins have to be the origin of a recirculation. We can have another situation. We can have an obstructed deep venous system. And what happens then? Blood flow can't ascend through the deep vein and finds its way through a perforating vein, for example, the proximal paratibial or antique, we said void, and it goes out here, the blood goes up through the saphenous vein and goes into the deep vein system, making a bypass, a vicarious shunt or a bypass to the deep venous system. And so we have a distal small superficial vein, a refluxing perforating, and a proximal wide superficial vein, but with draining flow in systole and diastole. So if we find a reflux through a perforating vein at the calf, we always have to be aware of a problem with the deep veins, of an obstruction or a reflux. A very seldom situation of perforating vein can be a bone perforating vein. It is seldom, but it has been shown that the reflux emerges from the tibial posterior vein and goes through the to the medulla in the bone and emerges somewhere. And most often, in my experience, it is an old fracture or indentation of the bone, like you can here very well see in the periost, and then there is a blood emerging directly from the bone. And as you can imagine, this is very difficult to close surgically if you have not cement to close it like you need for bone surgery. And I recommend doing sclerotherapy for these cases. So the summary, if you only have to study the dilated perforating veins, most of the dilated veins will be re-entry perforating veins, and you will have an inwards flow in diastole through them, and they finish the recirculation, bringing the blood back to the deep venous system. You very seldom will find a dilated perforating vein as the proximal escape point of the recirculation. You have to be careful. If you in systole and diastole have an outward flow, you have to think of a deep venous obstruction or reflux. So thank you for your attention. If you're interested in further information, I can afford this one options to read more of my love, the duplex ultrasound. And now I hope to join you in the discussion. Thank you. Coming soon. And I will make little master classes with CME points to be looked online. So if you're interested, just send me an email. Thank you.